Hello and thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Here's a look at some of the stories we've been following for you today. A crime wave has swept across the nation. More robberies and the largest spike in murders in 6 decades as Biden works to shed the Defund the Police label from the Democratic Party. A bipartisan push is underway on Capitol Hill to invest more in law enforcement. And crime is up all across the country. This as more cities around the U.S. are loosening laws and releasing criminals back to the streets. A former captain for a sheriff's department and United States Congressman may have some answers. What's next for Biden's faltered Build Back Better bill? The White House says today it might lose its branding, but some Democrats seem to be waving goodbye, not just to its name. A crime wave has swept across the nation. Robberies are up, people are walking out of stores with merchandise, and murders have spiked over the past 2 years. In 2020, we saw the largest spike in murders in 6 decades. The Biden administration is insisting that tackling crime is a focus for the administration. And today on Capitol Hill, there was a bipartisan push for Washington to take swift action. NTD's Melina Wisecup reports for us.
Here on Capitol Hill, lawmakers are discussing how to tackle the rise in crime. At the same exact time, a group of Senate Republicans and a group of House Democrats spoke about their ideas for reducing this crime spike. House Democrats specifically want to send the message that this is an area that both parties can come together on.
And this is one of them that we should all come together.
The Congresswoman is a former chief of police herself. She's working with other House Democrats on a bipartisan bill to invest in police. This as a nationwide police shortage lingers, especially in the nation's most crime-ridden cities. The Big Apple this year has seen a crime spike in almost every police precinct. 6 New York City police officers were shot this year. 2 died.
These are dangerous jobs. People wake up in the morning, tell their families goodbye, never knowing whether they're going to be able to come home.
On the Hill, a bipartisan bill to invest in law enforcement is underway. It's the Invest in Law Enforcement Act of 2022, authored by Representative Gottheimer.
It will allocate resources for body-worn cameras and cloud storage and provide grants for small departments to recruit new officers and retention bonuses to help departments keep their existing officers.
President Biden has dedicated $350 billion from the American Rescue Plan passed last summer for local states and cities to invest in law enforcement. This in response to the crime spike, which included a 30% rise in murders in 2020, the largest jump in 6 decades. And the murder rate rose again last year.
Murder rates are rising, assault rates are rising, carjacking rates are rising. Last year, 12 major American cities broke records, homicide rates.
Another contributor to rising crime is some cities changing policies on how they're prosecuting crimes. Some district attorneys have announced they will not prosecute what they call minor crimes. Critics say this emboldens criminals. And while some Democrats stand behind these new policies, some Democrats are opposed to them.
And if we want to reduce the crime rate, then we've got to identify those perpetrators and put them in jail.
So, Melina, with this push we're seeing from these House Democrats today, it looks like Democrats are trying to shed the defund the police messaging. We just heard those exact words from Biden last week. Let's listen to what he said about this.
Look, as I said, we're not about defunding. We're about funding and providing the additional services you need.
Now, Biden said that when he visited New York City last week to talk about the drastic rise in violent crime. So, Melina, what can you tell us about this shift in messaging?
So President Biden's comments in his visit to New York does come as those midterms are just around the corner. So this is an area where Democrats definitely want to address and make sure they're clear with the American people about their stance on law enforcement. Now, usually when we hear about Democrats' ideas for tackling rising crime, they usually turn to gun control. But today we didn't hear much about gun control. It was mainly about investing more in law enforcement. Now, if this law enforcement investment is something that congressional leadership does take up in the future, it is very likely to gain substantial bipartisan support. But of course, that depends on how much lawmakers want to politicize the issue or if they're more committed to tackling the crime spike. Steve?
Thanks for that, Melina. As misdemeanor crime is being decriminalized in many big cities across the U.S., violent crime is surging to historic levels. Congressman Clay Higgins spent years of his career in law enforcement, and we had a chance to sit down and get his thoughts. Congressman Clay Higgins, thank you for joining us in the Capitol Report.
Thank you, Steve. Glad to be here.
Congressman, I want to talk to you about rising crime throughout the United States. One of the toughest hit cities is Chicago. Mayor Lori Lightfoot is attributing the rise in carjackings to pure boredom and remote learning. Boredom because of learning from home. What would you say, in your opinion, your experience, is the rise in crime we're seeing?
Well, Mayor Lightfoot is reflective of part of the problem. You know, our municipalities, our cities are in trouble largely because of mayors like that don't get it. Or worse, perhaps they do get it, maybe they do understand, and they're purposefully hindering professional law enforcement. So the Defund the Police movement is echoed through liberal cities. And the effectiveness of the police departments that serve those cities is obviously going to be impacted by that tone, that persecution of a street cop just trying to do their job. And who pays the price is the citizenry. This is why you see an incredible increase in violent crime, including carjackings and these bizarre smash and grab thefts and violent crimes across the board. They're almost universally happening within liberal cities that have weak law enforcement policies or defund the police policies. So Mayor Lightfoot and I would not get along if I was her chief.
Now, Congressman, you spent quite a bit of time in law enforcement, 12 years on a SWAT team, captain of a sheriff's office. Tell us, many Democrats have been calling for defunding the police. They've toned it down a bit. But does this create a hostile environment for police officers to actually do their job?
Sure. Like the number of certified peace officers across the country is rather small. You'd be surprised. There's only about 750,000 certified full-time peace officers across the country. And so that's the thin blue line between order and horror. It stands the thin blue line. Because the criminal element will completely dominate the streets if police officers are inhibited from doing their job. So we have to turn that around in America, or the criminals are going to run the street, because police officers will leave the job in large numbers. You're already seeing that happening. We can still save it, but we need courageous and strong conservative leadership in our cities.
Now, you just sort of touched upon it. You mentioned that police officers, when they're taking a lot of this incoming hate from the public, will potentially stay in their car rather than pursuing a suspect. What other things, or is this the main result of calling to defund the police and all of the rhetoric against the police?
Well, the prosecutions, or the narrative about removing qualified immunity as an insulation that protects peace officers from frivolous lawsuits or targeted lawsuits. America doesn't quite understand what qualified immunity is, and that we have to do better about explaining that. But the bottom line is that if a police officer is doing their job within the parameters of his training and department policy, then he's protected from lawsuit, minus the department itself and the legal team that comes with that. So you couldn't sue just that police officer. You would have to sue that police officer for his behavior. If you believe you have a case, if it's a righteous lawsuit, by all means. But now you're suing that police officer and his department and his county or his city, whatever the jurisdictional authority is. Because regular officers, we cannot afford legal teams to defend us against targeted lawsuits. So we are at a turning point right now in America. We're either going to restore law and order in our urban communities and across the country from sea to shining sea by reasonable and compassionate but disciplined and strong law enforcement policy, or we're going to turn our country over to the criminals. America has to make a choice.
Congressman Clay Higgins, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate you. God bless you.
Thank you. Top Democrats are calling for tighter restrictions on Congress members trading stocks. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says there should be tougher fines for violating the Stock Act, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is calling for Congress to act. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi answered reporters' questions on Wednesday. She had previously resisted banning stock trading for members of Congress. She said in December that members, quote, should be able to participate in that. But now she's suggesting tougher penalties.
We have to tighten the fines on those who violate the Stock Act. It's evidently not sufficient to deter behavior. And then the third is just really, it has to be government-wide. The
Stock Act of 2012 bars members and employees of Congress from insider trading. But according to the investigation by Business Insider, 55 members have violated the act in 2021 alone. And other data shows that Pelosi and her husband have made millions from stock trading since taking office. Pelosi is now suggesting expanding the requirement of the Stock Act to the judiciary branch.
The court system, the third branch of government, the judiciary, has no reporting. The Supreme Court has no disclosure. It has no reporting of stock transactions, and it makes important decisions every day.
The fate of Biden's Build Back Better bill. The White House says it's considering a rebranding, while some Democrats are shifting their focus to somewhere else. NTD's Iris Tao has more.
President Biden's Build Back Better brand might be no more, or at least the name of it. The White House today confirms the possibility of a name change.
Rebranding the bill, a name change, is that something that you've considered and you think would be beneficial?
Sure. Look, I think our objective is to determine how much of the president's Build Back Better agenda, whatever you call it, can be moved forward.
But President Biden does not seem to be giving up on it. He met with utility CEOs on Wednesday to discuss his BBB agenda.
Like the rest of my Build Back Better plan, the clean energy companies of this plan are about lowering prices.
Many Democratic senators are frustrated after spending months on the $2 trillion bill only to see it fall short of passing. And now...
All right, so we're gearing up to have a productive couple of weeks.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is among the Democrats who are now pushing bills that have bipartisan support, and unlike core components of BBB, might have a chance of passing.
After nearly a year of work, we are as close as ever to pass this bipartisan legislation that will address this microchip shortage.
And it's another area I hope Democrats and Republicans can continue working on as we pass meaningful legislation to keep America secure.
The shift of focus comes as lawmakers are getting ready for re-elections, and they might want to get more actual work done as accomplishments under their belt. Reporting in D.C., Iris Howe, NTD News.
5 states are suing the Biden administration for increasing the minimum wage for federal contractors to $15 per hour. Arizona and South Carolina are 2 of those states. The change went into effect on January 30th. It covers around 500,000 businesses that employ 1/5 of the entire U.S. labor force. Attorneys general of the 5 states are arguing that President Biden lacked statutory authority to mandate the minimum wage by executive order. The U.S. Senate had rejected Biden's proposal to include a $15 minimum wage in the CCP virus relief package. They voted against it 58-42. The Justice Department announced Tuesday its biggest financial seizure, more than $3.6 billion. Only this time, it's in cryptocurrency.
The message to criminals is clear. Cryptocurrency is not a safe haven. We can and we will follow the money, no matter what form it takes.
Authorities arrested a New York couple. They're charged with conspiracy to launder cryptocurrency stolen during the hack. The Justice Department seized 94,000 Bitcoin from the couple at a value of $3.6 billion, making this the largest financial seizure in history. Senator Tom Cotton is calling on Democrats to support his bill to end all mask mandates in schools, as several blue states are moving to drop the mask mandates, but the White House is still lagging behind. U.S. Senator Rick Scott released a statement on the International Olympic Committee and the human rights abuses committed by the Chinese Communist Party. We'll have his thoughts coming up. On again, off again. That's been the case for many blue states around the country when it comes to mask mandates. Are they following the science or the political science? Georgia Congressman Buddy Carter weighs in. Hello and welcome back to NTD's Capitol Report. Today, Senator Tom Cotton called on his Democratic colleagues to support his bill to end all mask mandates in schools. This comes as several Democratic governors are lifting their in-school mask rules.
Although kids are at the lowest risk of hospitalization and death from the Wuhan coronavirus, they've endured and they continue to endure some of the most excessive, extreme, and suffocating COVID restrictions of any population in our country.
Senator Cotton called on Democrats to support his bill, but got immediate objection.
If you want education decisions to happen at the local level, you do not tie the hands of state and local officials. You don't cut schools off from the resources they need just because you think you know better than the parents and local officials.
Senator Cotton disagreed with Murray's argument.
I think that you, as a parent, knows better. You know what's best for your child, not some Democratic politician, not some liberal superintendent, not some neurotic public health obsessive.
School mask mandates have become a major controversy nationwide. Parents have pushed back against school districts for mandating students of all ages to wear masks. This week, Democratic governors in 6 states have announced an end to indoor mask mandates, some of them including schools. In Virginia, the state Senate just passed a bill to end school mask mandates with Democrat support. The White House is not behind this move. During today's briefing, the CDC director said that the agency's guidance on indoor masking has not changed. They will continue to endorse universal masking in schools.
Our hospitalizations are still high. Our death rates are still high. So as we work towards that and as we are encouraged by the current trends, we are not there yet.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said today that the administration will continue recommending the CDC's guidelines on masking in schools. However, parents of all political parties are calling to remove mask mandates for children. We're starting to see quite a few blue states react, raising the question if these mandates have become hyper-politicized. We sat down with Congressman Buddy Carter to discuss. Congressman Buddy Carter, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Thank you.
Now, Congressman, I want to talk to you about some of the unintended consequences from the pandemic, specifically the lockdowns. And, one of those that we've seen is substance abuse. How serious of an issue is this?
Oh, it's very serious. I mean, if you look, you see that over the past year, we lost over 100,000 people to overdoses. And much of that was fentanyl. Much of it can be attributed to what's going on our southern border. But a lot of it is the lockdowns themselves. People obviously have turned to drugs and alcohol, and it's caused mental health problems. This is something that's going to last for a while. So we're not out of the woods as far as that's concerned at all. We were trying to say months ago, in fact, almost a year ago, that the lockdowns were not necessary. Now, a study out of Johns Hopkins has come out and said just that. And, it almost proves that we were right then. But, there are serious consequences to lockdowns. There's no question about it. And we're beginning to see that. And I think we're going to see it for quite a while. And certainly the drug overdoses are just awful.
Now, you just touched upon fentanyl, and I think you have quite a pedigree when it comes to talking about pharmaceutical drugs.
Yeah.
Tell us about this drug. Why is it killing so many people? Why are we seeing such a surge?
Well, first of all, there's enough fentanyl in this country right now to kill every American 7 times, and it's because of the porous border. It's coming across that border. Fentanyl is very potent and very poisonous, and just a small, minuscule amount can kill someone. And oftentimes, what happens is that because it's so cheap, the counterfeit pills that are out there, almost 2 out of 5 counterfeit pills are laced with fentanyl, and it's intended to give them a high, more of a high and a quicker high. And unfortunately, when people take these counterfeit pills, oftentimes they overdose. Fentanyl is so potent and so poisonous that even the Border Patrol agents and policemen are warned to wear gloves when they're handling it, because it can be absorbed through the skin and actually kill them that way. So you have to be extremely careful with this. But you know, when you talk about the fact that 100,000 people died because of overdoses, many of those were attributed to fentanyl. When you talk about the fact that the #1 leading cause of people between the age of 18 and 45 now is drug overdoses. You talk about all these things. 11,000 pounds of fentanyl was seized at our border last year. I mean, it's just unbelievable, and it's got to be stopped.
Wow, it's amazing. Now, Congressman, we're starting to see some of these blue states lifting mask mandates, yet some are not. For the ones that are, do you think that they're following the science, or is it more the political science?
No, there's no question in my mind it's the political science. I find it very disingenuous that all of a sudden, as we get closer to the elections in the midterms, that they decide to follow the science. I mean, they're following political science. There's no question about that. And now we see New York and California lifting mask mandates, and you know, when they should have been lifted months ago. And the only reason they're doing it now is because of politics, and that's just unfortunate. And look, you know, the administration, the Democrats, they want to control you. And this is about control. That's what the lockdowns are about. That's what the mask mandates are about. It's not about science. They're not following science. They're just trying to control you. And that's despicable, to be quite honest with you.
Now, what we've been hearing is that the political implications of masking children in school is kind of going across party lines. There's a lot of Democrats. What are you hearing in your district from parents who may not necessarily be Republican or conservative on this issue?
There are quite a few of them who are very concerned. I mean, these children have been masked for, you know, for many of them, they don't know anything but mask. And you lose so much. And look, I'm a grandfather, and I've got grandchildren who are in school, and my 6-year-old grandson has been wearing masks for the last 2 years in Virginia. And you know, the facial expressions that you learn and that you interpret, that's missing. And this is, again, this is going to have, I think, a long-term impact on their psyche, and I really am concerned about that.
Congressman Buddy Carter, thank you.
Thank you.
On Tuesday, the House voted to lift strict budget requirements for the U.S. Postal Service.
On this vote, the yeas are 342, the nays are 92. The bill is passed. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
The Postal Service is supposed to sustain itself with postal sales and services. But according to the USPS, it has incurred losses for 14 years straight and is expected to run out of cash by 2024. The problem stems from growing workers' compensation benefits along with reduced mail volume. The bill would bolster efficiency, continue 6-day delivery, and repeals a requirement to pre-fund retiree health benefits. In a bipartisan vote, the bill sailed through the House and is likely to pass the Senate. Florida Senator Rick Scott is condemning the Chinese regime for arresting dissidents and religious minorities leading up to the Winter Olympics. He says that arrests in China target those who speak against the regime. The senator's statement came after police arrested an adherent of the spiritual group Falun Gong 3 days before the Games started. They also arrested a veteran Hong Kong pro-democracy activist hours before the opening ceremony on February 4th. The Republican lawmaker says that by remaining silent, the International Olympic Committee is complicit in the Chinese Communist Party's human rights abuses. Former Georgia Representative Vernon Jones is running for Congress, and he received an endorsement from former President Trump earlier today. The 61-year-old served 2 different terms in the Georgia State House up until 2021. He was a Democrat for most of his life, but in 2020 he threw his support behind the former president and switched to the Republican Party. Earlier this year, Jones endorsed former Senator David Perdue over the incumbent Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. And that's all we have for you tonight on the Capitol Report. Thank you for tuning in. From Washington, D.C., I'm Steve Lance, and we'll see you again tomorrow.